Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. I've met many people during my career, and have spent many hours on stage on and off with these musicians talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with you. Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today. My next guest is somebody who I have anticipated having a conversation with and chatting with for so many years. We have so many dear friends in common, and I think we met once at the Sweet and Hot Festival in LAX, maybe in a musician's lounge or something. I think Westy Westonhofer introduced us once.
Wow.
And Westy and I became great friends, and he spoke of you often, and so I feel like I've known you, because he talked about those days when you were commuting from New Orleans to Disneyland to our show.
Right.
But let's get to that in a minute. Let's talk about you. I can't believe that you were born in Ohio.
I know. My joke is, as soon as I found out where I was, I moved.
Yeah. There's the Hardwick brothers. I don't know if you know Denny. You know Denny and Dick. They have that joke about being born in Indiana is wonderful if you're a tractor. So.
Right. I actually loved it. I moved when I was 9 and ended up in South Florida. But those young years when I was a kid, I really enjoyed it in Ohio. I was an only child, but my mother came from a family of 9 siblings and my father a family of 13. So,
wow.
Yeah, I was odd man out at all of the family get-togethers, but I had a lot of cousins, still do.
I would imagine. Well, was it a rural existence, or were you in downtown?
No,
Dayton?
I was right down in Dayton, but both of my parents grew up on farms. My mother was in West Alexandria, Ohio, which is, I don't know, an hour.
Yeah,
so
I was originally
outside.
from David City, Nebraska, so I simpatico. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Interesting. Cool. Now, I'm learning so much about you because I research everybody I talk to, even the ones I know extremely well. And you started out with your training in dance.
I did. I started taking dance lessons when I was 3 years old. So I sort of always thought I would end up being a dancer. And my first 2 professional gigs were as a dancer, no singing or anything. But I sang all the way through school in school choirs and the chorus and in church choirs. So I was always a singer-dancer my entire life. So I knew I would be earning my living in the business one way or the other.
Were you an alto?
You betcha. Well, actually, when I was a kid, I was the high soprano. I did all the descant parts, all the, all those things
Sure.
up in the stratosphere. But I had a good ear, and so when I was young, I could sing another part against the melody and wouldn't get pulled off. So I immediately got pushed into being, singing harmony. Although I still had a soprano voice at the time, it definitely became an alto, as I grew up.
When did the desire hit you to become a soloist?
Wow. I don't know that there was a desire so much as it just happened. When I auditioned for my college musical, I ended up with the lead as Maria in Sound of Music.
Oh.
Anyway, I just thought about 3 jokes just went through my head that I will not share.
We'll have none of that.
Yes, please. But I think, having the lead in a play puts you out there and you sort of realize you can do that. And then my 3rd job was singing for Your Father's Mustache in Miami Beach at a club called Joe the Bartender's that was had an arrangement with Jackie Gleason because he was filming his TV show. And so I was forced, well, I wasn't forced, but I mean, I had to do 1 or 2 solo numbers a set. There were 3 girls in the show, and we did 3, numbers where we sang and danced and did all the Nagasaki's and By the Sea, all that kind of stuff. And then we would come out and sing 1 or 2 solo numbers a set. So I just fell into doing solo stuff. And then after, I think it was like 15 months or something, when that show closed, Joel Schiavone, who was the owner of all the mustaches, invited me to come to New York and be on the road with their touring band. And that's what
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask you, before that, did you have formal vocal coaches?
When I was 9, I studied with an opera singer for a while. And then that was the only real coaching I had when I was younger. Then later on, when I was working at the Mustache in Miami Beach, the singing all the time, I was starting to get a bit of an irritated throat once, and I did go to a coach there to find out about how to stop vocal abuse from happening.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was just kind of curious about the training.
Interrupt away. I'd be the record where you drop the needle. I go until you pick it up. So
that's wonderful. It makes it easy to interview. So you're on your way to New York.
Oh, yeah. So because they were only going to have 1 girl be a part of that, it was just 2 banjos, a tuba, trombone, and me, and occasionally a washboard, that I became the solo singer, and it just naturally just sort of led me that way. I didn't even have to make a choice and decide that's what I was going to do. So
how did you end up making that transit we talked about earlier, when you're actually doing Disneyland and living in New Orleans? I think you're a crazy woman.
Well, so I had moved to New York. I was working for Your Father's Mustache for 3 years out on the road. And then the band itself got a bit toxic. And the trombone player, Sonny Helmer from Miami Beach, had gone out to work for Disney in California. And he was pitching them on doing a variation of what we did in Miami Beach to them to be in the Horseshoe at night. So in the day you had the Horseshoe Review, and then at night he pitched them on this 1920s show. It was a half-hour show, 4 shows a night, and the same show over and over again. And I went out, and it was so much fun, and it was so much healthier. It's a healthier environment to work in. So I went back to New York and gave my notice, and then went out to California to work with Sonny. And later on, that's when I met Westy. I don't know how many years I had been doing, maybe 2 years or so before Westy came on board. And I said, I loved Westy. I mean, who didn't love Westy, right? That great laugh of his, and he was just hysterical and a prankster, and just...
And on the top of it, a gentleman. I think a true definition of a gentle giant.
Yeah.
He and I was fortunate enough to be in a band with him for several years, with him on trombone and me on tuba, and God, talking about hijinks.
Oh.
Because we're both idiots. No. And of course, I just talked to, in fact, I'm going to have Sharon, his wife, I'm going to have Sharon and the boys on to do a group interview, probably sometime in the holidays.
How wonderful.
Talk about Westy. But, yeah, it's kind of cool. Now, you were literally getting on the airplane and flying weekends.
Oh, no.
Oh.
I was there for the entire summer, and got an apartment out there. And then at the end of the summer, so yeah, it was, I couldn't have afforded that, and they couldn't have paid me enough. No, I would come out, I think I came out that first summer in, I guess at the beginning of June, and then stayed through the first part of September. And then actually the park booked a lot of private parties. So I ended up staying through the fall, and eventually in December, when the private parties started falling off, that's when I went back to New Orleans. And then I would be in New Orleans for most of the time, the fall and the winter, and then I would come back to Disney again in the spring and the summer. So it was a sort of schizophrenic bi-coastal.
Who was in the original cast?
Sonny Helmer on trombone, and he was the leader. Artie Dragon on trombone. Joan Dragon on banjo. My husband Buzzy on banjo. And so banjo. I think it was, and Bob Raggio on washboard.
Okay. And so then after that cast, they ended up with John Reynolds and Ralph and Westy. And
Ralph was never in with the class of 27
who
in California. Raggio the entire time.
Okay.
At least, the whole time I was there, and I think even after I left. Oh, and then somebody came in after that, but I can't tell you who it was, but it wasn't Ralph.
Oh, it's okay. Yeah, so anyway, so I, like I said, I've managed to work with all those guys, and there's always a Banu story.
And it's think sheep, Banu.
Banu. Well, yeah. I knew that. I can hear it, Westy saying it in my head. And he had talked about the bit he pulled when you were supposed to back up to him to get a lollipop.
I was going to tell that, and I wasn't sure if I should. I didn't know.
Go ahead. Please do.
Oh, my gosh. So this is after a couple of years of doing the show, and, you get a little bit bored with it. And we used to get a kid up out of the audience, and we'd put the kid's hands on Sonny's trombone slide, and then Sonny would just move back and forth, and it would seem as if the kid was playing trombone. Then at the end of that, I would back up, and I'd put my hand behind my back, and Westy would stick one of those big, gigantic lollipops in it, and then I would turn around and give it to the kid and thank them and then take them back off stage. Well, this one night, I put my hand behind my back and backed up, and the slimiest, oh my God, I thought, what the hell is that? And it turned out to be a hot dog that he stuck in my hand. And from where my hand was and the position of Westy's body, you can think of what the conclusion I jumped to. And I just let out a little scream. And then I, took it out of my hand. I'm looking at a hot dog. And Westy's laugh just echoed throughout the whole place. He just thought that was hysterical. And
I interviewed a couple of the guys. They were talking about some of the other things that were put in Sonny Helmer's picture, other than Diet Coke at times. Yeah,
we did the big one that the only time I never saw Sonny chug was we put prune juice in there for the New Year's Eve, one of the New Year's Eve sets, and he started to drink it. It went in his mouth, and then it went right back into the pitcher. And he looked at me with the meanest, what is that? And I said, prune juice.
Yeah, when he was doing that at Father's Mustache, he was using beer, right? He was actually pitchers of beer.
Yep. It turned out to be about 5 cans of beer every time he did it. He eventually started watering it down a little bit and he had to, of course, when he got to the horseshoe, it was sponsored by Pepsi. So he had to use Pepsi. Oh God. So he used, we mixed it with Diet Pepsi and watered down, but
Yeah, he was a real trooper, I guess.
Yep.
All kinds of stories Wesley told me. I guess you did a couple things on the road with him. What was it? You had a gig somewhere where Sonny would show up 2 days early so he could get a room close to the ice machine.
Well, the one that we did at Harvey's Wagon Wheel, he only showed up like an hour and a half before the gig. And, oh my God, that entire episode was just insane. And we ended up getting fired after our first set. It was so bad. It was so disorganized. Everything was so wrong. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I like I said, I try to really research the people who I'm talking to, and My gosh, you must have one heck of an agent. Not that you're not talented. You're wonderfully talented, and I've always been a fan. But you've got yourself in some pretty high places over the years. Talk a little bit about some of your favorites.
The Hollywood Bowl, a weekend of performances with my band and the Hollywood Bowl Symphony with John Malcheri conducting. That was great. I brought in the Millennium with the Boston Pops. I was like their only guest artist.
Now, you had somebody do those arrangements, obviously. Who did orchestral arrangements for you?
The first couple of ones were by a pianist that was in town named Ed Greenman. And then after that, all of them were done by John Sheridan, who was the pianist with the Jim Cullum Jazz Band. And John's stuff was just wonderful. And it took a while to figure out how to get the right combination with, a jazz band and an orchestra.
Yeah.
Because it's
I was actually the tuba player with a group called Banjo Mania for a while, which was Doug and Brad. And I did the arrangements for some symphonic stuff we did with Riverside Symphony. Getting an orchestra to swing is
it does
not
not
drive a Cadillac in a pool of mud.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, it's it's that whole thing about like pushing a rope up a hill. It just doesn't work. But the thing that we figured out early on was we would never ask the orchestras to swing. And we would, they'd say, "Do you want us to swing?" And we go, "No, don't swing. No,
By
good
all
God.
means."
Yeah, don't swing." But so we ended up basing most of my arrangements on like the Warner Brothers studio orchestra from the late 30s on what you would hear behind a young Judy Garland, where they would make that type of arrangement. And because David Boatinghouse, my pianist and musical director, both he and Tom Fisher, who was in my band, they both graduated from IU, Indiana University, with David has a master's in classical performance, and Tom Fisher's got a music degree. And so they both knew the ins and out of working with pops and symphony orchestras and how they hate doing pops orchestras. And so they were very instrumental in helping move me away from making musical choices that would get us in trouble. Like orchestras hate playing footballs. They just, get so bored, but you don't want to make them mad by making anything too complicated. Yeah. So you have to, it's a tightrope act of making it interesting enough for them to play. Matter of fact, one of my best compliments that I got was from a violinist once that said, "Oh, I usually bring a book to read, and I didn't read anything while you were working."
Yeah, I made the ultimate mistake, is I actually wrote in bowing suggestions for the violins, and they said, "Don't you ever presume to know how I want to bow this,"
Yeah.
I went, oops.
We had to do that on every time I get in a new chart. We would, I'd apologize to the strings because they were going to have to write how they wanted to do their bowing in on it. So it took a little bit of time, and then I would pretty much just leave how they wanted to bow it in for the next symphony, and then they could see that it had been written in by another symphony, and then I'd figure out. We played a lot with the St. Louis Symphony, which is like one of the top 5, and so I used to just say to another orchestra, "Oh, the bowings were put in by the St. Louis Symphony. If you don't like them, you can certainly change them." So I wanted somebody to see them cop an attitude with a top-notch symphony. There. Yeah.
That's funny. And that's very smart. I didn't think of that. Well, you thought Perlman put those bowings in. Oh.
Yeah, right.
So what are things like in New Orleans right now? You have a venue?
No. At the moment, matter of fact, the newspaper just yesterday said that we were going to be. Are you asking me specifically or in general? Because we just got our ability to have indoor music come back, and so we're going to see over the next week or so how that all plays out. Because at the moment, there's no music really going on except for porch concerts.
Right, right. There are a couple. Evan Christopher, who I was in a band with for a while. Of course, he's
Yeah.
done some outside on a trailer bed type of stuff. So, as well as Matt Perrine, who's another buddy of mine, and Jason Jerzak and those guys.
Yeah.
But I've seen them hitting the streets, and I wouldn't think that would be much of a venue for you. So.
No, I haven't had much of a itch to do anything like that. It seemed like a lot of work. I'd have to drag out my PA and
Oh yeah, I understand.
all that kind of stuff.
And especially if you're playing for traffic, nobody needs that.
Right.
Especially after you've played with St. Louis Symphony. But no, I'm not. I'm really not implying anything on your part here. It's just that wow, I'm so envious of your resume. National TV and world travel. Now I've done some world travel, but not quite to your extent. Featured on Charles Kuralt's America. I mean, come on, Banu. Did you think this was going to happen when you were in Dayton?
I of course not. I mean, I was 9.
Well, there are those kids who tap dance with the sequin bow tie and
Sure. Oh yeah. I just liked the arts, and so I didn't have that. I'm going to make it kind of. I want to be a star. That was not my driving factor. I just liked performing and that side of it. So, but I think to your earlier question, when I got to New Orleans. And I guess right around the time I put my band together, I realized that anybody that was making it coming out of the city didn't stay in the city. They got a national reputation and then came back home. So that's what Al Hurd did. It's what Pete Fountain did. It's what the Neville Brothers did. And so I just sort of looked at that pattern, and I started all these other people that were playing really good gigs. I started asking them how they got theirs. Most of it was, at the time, you could pretty much just play the jazz festival circuit, but it didn't pay well. If you were a professional musician, we'd make more money in town, just not leaving, but you need to get your name out, so you need to do the festivals, and so then I started to realize we needed to be working performing arts centers. And that's when I hooked up with an agent. And it was Donna Zients, and she was also booking James DePogny and some other trad jazz bands. I think she had Cullum at the time and Butch Thompson. So she had kind of the cream of the crop. And Butch was working on Prairie Home Companion, so he had that, and she had that to push. And once we started working performing arts centers and getting to a larger audience, it was a much nicer and bigger paycheck. So and then it was that nice circle of things where if you were doing these jazz festivals all over the country, if you got a booking, like anytime I get a booking out in LA, I knew I'd have a good audience because of the people that came to the Sweet and Hot Jazz Festival and stuff like that. And so I normally played the Norris Theater in Palos Verdes, and I played Pepperdine and Costa Mesa and Fullerton and San Luis Obispo.
I was on all of them, yeah.
Yeah. So, you could build a reputation that way. So we had good bookings in California. We were in St. Louis a lot because first of the Riverboat Rag Fest. Then because of that, we ended up, when we started doing symphony concerts, my very first one was with the Grand Rapids Symphony, and Richard Heyman was conducting, and he was also the conductor for St. Louis. So if you got in good with, as you got in good with a conductor, they normally conducted maybe 2 or 3 other pops orchestras. So if they liked you, they'd recommend you to their next orchestra. Plus, they didn't have to do so much work. They'd already figured out your charts. So it's like,
Let me ask you about that. What is it like? What kind of format do you choose when you're doing, say, a symphony gig? How do you put your sets together? How do you plan something that large?
I've always been pretty good about figuring out how to program stuff. So normally the first two songs are with the orchestra. Then there'd be one that just features the band. Then another one with the orchestra. So we go back and forth a little bit. Normally there'd be 8 to 9 tunes with the orchestra, and then the rest would be fill-ins with the band.
Oh. What brought you to banjo?
When I moved to New York, my husband played banjo while he was getting his PhD at NYU in theater, and so he sort of taught me to play ukulele so that I could kind of accompany myself. And then later on, when we moved to New Orleans, he interviewed for a job teaching at Tulane. This is before we were married, and he got hired. And he just moved all of our stuff from New York down to New Orleans. I was out in California working for Disney, and so I said, "Gee, I guess I'm ending up in New Orleans." And then when we finally got here, he said, "You'll always work if you can play the banjo in this city." So I just took my ukulele skills and got a banjo. The interesting thing was I could play at the nut, I could play down the neck, and then I could jump up the octave and play everything up there because they were the same positions. Everything in the middle, I had no idea what was going on there.
So you were playing tenor?
No, I was actually playing guitar too. I was actually playing ukulele.
Oh, guitar tuning, okay.
Then later on, when I had a tour with Wild Bill in Germany, I to prove a point. Oh, I got stories. To prove a point to David Boatinghouse, I learned to play tenor tuning. So I now play tenor tuning on my banjo and guitar tuning on my 4-string tenor guitar.
So you have some stories about Germany and Wild Bill?
Well, you know what?
I'm sorry. The only reason I ask is I found that the audiences everywhere but here were wildly appreciative of what we do.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's bizarre. I did a tour of Hungary at one point in time. Tamasistas, his festival there, he had us actually tour the entire country, and it was crazy to see college kids out in the audience singing along to Ice Cream. and then you come back to the States and you can't get anybody under 60 to say hello,
Right.
Please tell me about Germany.
Well, I actually started maybe at this point 8 years ago writing a book about all the craziness that happened out on the road. And there's a whole chapter on Wild Bill and Germany. Oh my God, it was fun. It was like touring with a naughty little 3-year-old. Wild Bill was just incorrigible, and he would just do stuff to, I found out later as I watched him do all this, it was deliberate. He loved causing trouble. And when I showed up at the airport to join the band, I think we all met in New York before we were flying over, and he was saying to Tommy Saunders, the cornet player out of Detroit, "I don't know why we got to have a goddamn singer with us. Why do we need a goddamn singer?" And I was like in earshot, and I thought, oh, this is embarrassing. Well, I found out later he knew I was standing there. He was just deliberately doing that. When we met up with Danny Moss, the sax player from England, he did the same thing to him. It was like, "I don't know where there a goddamn saxophone player from England," So I realized, oh, this is his modus operandi. And then when we had our first rehearsal and we ran through everything, and I was obviously going to be okay, he looked over at Tommy and said, "Yeah, she'll do." So it was fun, but he would just do outrageous stuff. We got off the plane in Germany in the airport, and he's screaming very loudly, "I'm not going to be happy till I go home with Hitler's jock strap." And I'm just like, oh no, I always make sure I was walking far away from the group, if he's going to go off. He tried taking pictures off of the hotel walls, and I wonder if this thing's nailed down, I'm like, oh, geez, Bill. But his plane, and we were both backstage for 3 numbers before he would go out on stage. So I got a chance to talk to him and ask him about what it was like to play when he was, first starting out. And I wish I'd known more about his past so I could ask more insightful questions. But
that's kind of why I wanted to do the show. For example, I knew George Probert really well, and I didn't get to him for an interview before his passing. And boy, is that a loss, as far as stories and history and stuff. Same thing with Westy. Anyway, I want to make sure that all of my talented friends that are out there don't go down quietly in history is all.
Yeah, I hope somebody got a bunch of Jake Hanna's stuff. He was on another tour. I tell a Jake Hanna story on one of my on several of my interviews actually. As I think it was the Sun Valley, Idaho Festival, and I walked by and he was playing with South Market Street with Bill Dendel's group. And we looked in, and Evan had called a tune out of nowhere. That's not the tune. I can't remember what the name of the song was, and the band didn't know it. And he launches into it, and the band kind of crashes and burns on stage. And Jake stands up and grabs the microphone and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, either you like Picasso or you don't." What was so funny about Jake was he would tell the same stories over again, but you never got tired of hearing them. You'd even request him, tell the story about the fill in the blank again, because you'd love hearing it. Or you'd drag other musicians. Have you heard Jake tell the story about it? And he was just so wonderful.
Do you have a title for your book yet?
Yes. My working title is Chick Singer, Tales from the Bandstand.
Interesting. And when do you think you might be done with that?
Who knows? I mean, I'm up to about I'm reaching 300 pages, and I've got at least 15 years left to write about. Obviously, it'll get condensed and everything.
You let me know when that happens, and I'll put you back on so we can plug it in my little small audience, my burgeoning audience, which I'm hoping to expand.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, well, the least I could do.
Yeah, and all those stories that I can't tell in a public place can be in print.
That's going to have to be a whole other show, I think, because everybody. There's a trumpet player in Sacramento named Bob Secoy, who went ahead and launched into actually a story about Bob Ringwald that I had to edit extensively, just because. Evidently, so on my show he dropped the F-bomb like 4 times in a row. But it's okay. But they're great stories.
Oh yeah, there was one of my favorite. I have a whole chunk of things about that I call lost in translation. Actually, the chapter's part of it's called Lost and Found in Translation. But when I was in Germany, they told me to bring over a lot of LPs. You'll sell tons of LPs. Bring a lot of LPs. So I brought LPs over, and I was selling them for what would have been $20 or 20 something. So they told me, I said, well, what's the word for 20 in German? And they told me. But by my growing up in close proximity to Miami Beach and working in Miami Beach, the word for 20 in German got sort of messed up with the Yiddish word something else. And instead of saying I was selling them for $20 or 20 marks, I said I was selling them for 20 dog penises.
Ah.
The audience was like,
yeah, they're kind of hard to come by.
That's right. There weren't many takers. I seem to have left all my dog penises at home.
Yeah, similar problems. Well, not exactly similar, but the first time I toured the UK, and the differences in meanings of words. Stuffing is not something you do to a turkey over there.
Yes.
And
yes.
And many of those instances where you sort of step on everything you own as you're speaking to them.
Yeah, I tell that story because that happened to me in Australia with, we were over at a party and the hostess asked me, she said, do anything else to eat or drink? And I said, oh gosh, no, I'm stuffed. And her eyes got really big and she said, don't say that over here, don't say that over here. And then I found out what that meant there. And when Boating House and Tom Fisher and I came back from Australia, we went into a Bob Evans. And all over all of the tables and little table tents, it had a big picture of a baked potato that said, get stuffed. So I took a bunch of them and sent them back to her in Australia. She said she put them all over her refrigerator.
Yeah. We did a couple of B&Bs while we were over there. And one of the people we were staying with was a very attractive woman. And before we all said our evening goodbyes and went to bed, she came by. She goes, now remember, I'm going to be by in the morning to knock you up. I went, yeah.
My kind of tour.
Wasn't exactly what she meant.
No, very disappointed.
It's pretty funny when you run into these kind of things.
Yeah.
So now you must have had some. I don't mean to ask this question to make us sad, but you must have had some pretty big gigs that have canceled as of March or February.
Actually, no. There weren't a lot of things on the books. There was, there were some things. I had a cruise and, and some other gigs, but nothing major. I mean, I lost the Jazz Fest here, canceled, and that's a very big, both financially and every other way. That's not a gig you want to have to postpone and cancel. So that one was bad. And Alan of Vichet's Jazz Fest at Sea had to postpone. So, but outside of that, not too many things that I was going to cry about.
I do have a question about last year's Mardi Gras. Tell me about the Diva Float, because I get to play with Katie Caveira all the time.
Oh.
And so when she went down there to visit and came back, I heard interesting things about the parade.
So I am a member of one of the all-female crews called Muses.
Ah, there we go.
And
wrong word, sorry.
Yeah, and when I lost my husband in 2013, and when Katie lost her husband, I wanted her to be able to come to New Orleans and ride on ride on my Mardi Gras float with me, because it was so therapeutic for me, and I sort of wanted to share that with her. And it doesn't automatically happen. Somebody has to not be riding for you to get a sub. And so the time I finally got her the sub spot, and we were all excited, when she got diagnosed with cancer and had to cancel because her doctors wouldn't let her go bouncing around on a big float, which made sense. And then it's not an automatic rollover. So just because she got accepted one year as a sub, it wasn't available the next year. So I was just so upset. And then finally, at the last minute, somebody needed a sub. And so Katie was able to come in. And we just had the best time. So you buy throws, the trinkets and things to throw to the crowd. And it was just heaven. And Katie and I had the best time. And it was, maybe because we had to wait so long to make it happen, it was even more glorious.
When she came back, she was absolutely beaming. And,
oh, good.
And talked. talked about what a great time she had. I'm really fortunate to have her as a friend, and I knew Woody well,
Oh,
so I understand it, and so thank you for supporting my girl. She's
uh,
not my girl, but we all think of her as that. She comes off as the
yeah,
perpetual 18-year-old.
yeah. I'm such a fan. She and I got to be close friends when after Hurricane Katrina, when the show opened in Paris, and Jerome Savary, who was the artistic director for the Opera Comique in Paris, came over and ended up hiring David, gave him um, uh, put him in charge of hiring the bands, writing the arrangements and everything, and he hired Katie. So I met her with an extended amount of time when she came over to work on the show. And then when she had some conflicts, she asked me if I wanted to take over and play for her. And David said it was okay. And so I filled in for her. So we became much closer friends because of that show. And then we became even closer by us both losing our husbands. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I met Katie when her and Woody first came out to California. I was
Wow.
kind of the guy who introduced her to the jazz scene out here,
Wow.
and we spent a lot of times talking about her future and what she wanted to do and what kind of persona she should craft, type of thing. And the first name she brought up was you.
Get out.
No,
Wow. Wow.
no. So she's known about you and held you in high esteem from the very get go.
Oh, that's so sweet. That's very nice to hear.
Yeah, I thought. Well, I hoped you'd like to hear that.
Yeah, you betcha.
Although, and she's great. When I first met her, I didn't realize she was married, and I invited her out to the Palm Springs Festival to come check out the scene. And she walked up with Woody, and my heart just went. Of course, I was married too, so I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. But she is just such a cool lady.
Yep, absolutely.
I'm going to start kind of wrapping things up here for us. I was wondering what else you'd like to plug or talk about. We have time. It's not like I'm necessarily forcing you off the air, but I want to give you so much time to talk about whatever it is you'd like to talk about.
Well, I guess the only other thing I really should mention is like in 2010, I started the New Orleans Trad Jazz Camp. So
I didn't know that was yours. Okay.
yeah, and I'm the executive director. So through the kindness of the faculty, and they had to kind of hold a gun on their board of directors to let me come out and see how they ran their festival. But I got an idea when I went out about how they ran theirs, and then I did a little more research, and then when I got back to New Orleans, was able to figure out what would work for us, what didn't. And in the meantime, Katie's on the faculty with the Trad Jazz Camp here. Dan Levinson out of New York comes in.
I've got Dan lined up for an interview soon.
Oh, great. Yeah, you have to tell everybody I said hello.
I will.
So that's been great. We've been remarkably successful, which is just wonderful, because in this day and age, trying to start something for trad jazz, it's like you can build it, but you're not sure they will come. Right. But the community, it's one of the things that they kept saying, trying to convince the board of directors in San Diego was, don't look at it as competition, look at it as supporting the entire, traditional jazz scene. And it's done exactly that, because people that came to our camp then have also gone to San Diego. And then Molly and Bria in New York, when they started their camp, we all talked. They asked me a whole bunch of questions, and a bunch of people from ours go to theirs. So, and then some of the New York people have come down to us. So it's only, it's only feeding off of each other. It's good.
Is your camp both, is there an age requirement to be a member at your camp?
You have to be 18 and over. We do take scholarship kids that are high school and college age, and you can apply for a scholarship. If you can play. We've had some 13-year-olds come. If you can play, I want you. So we've had a couple of parents that say, I want my kid to come to your camp. We say, send in a tape. Let me hear him play. If he can cut it, he's in.
But you don't differentiate necessarily between an adult camper and a youth camper at your camp?
No.
Because I used to teach in Mammoth Lakes, and they did, and I used to teach. I know Sacramento does that, and San Diego doesn't. San Diego is only an adult camp, I think.
Only adults, yeah. Well, we don't have that. We're primarily out of, let's say, we have 90 to 100 campers. Only between 12 to 15 will be like either scholarship or young kids. It's a good balance because it's not, I think if it was like 50-50 or half and half, there might be, the dynamic might change where, I don't know. I'd have to think about it some more, but I like our balance. I don't want to have too many young kids. I don't want it to turn into mommy and daddy dropped you off for the week. Right. And, we've got very strict rules because we're on Bourbon Street. You can't just have kids running around, Hey kid, want to have a drink?
Well, that's kind of how a few of us got started, but that's beside the point. Yeah, I know, but I see all of these jazz camps as investment in the future. Of course, one of the things I'm big about is I'm also an educator, and we've got to have the school system starting their musical education at like 1920 instead of at 1956.
Yeah, hallelujah. Anytime we would have that kind of a conversation with somebody, and that they were like, jazz only started with bebop. I said, give me a trumpet player and have him play the Louis beginning to West End blues. If he can cut that, then we'll talk.
Exactly. And then the other thing that I found that jazz camps do that doesn't happen within the educational system is they teach them how to run a gig, how to run a band, how to write a check, how to negotiate with clients. Those kind of things that we all had to learn in very awkward ways are things that need to be taught,
Yeah, excellent. For sure.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. I tell a lot of my interviewees that are involved within education and jazz camps and things that I want to later on, as this series grows and as my audience grows, do a whole separate category of educators and things that would attract more for young musicians who are looking to get into the style, and do basically an education-based not interview, but picking people's brains about their way into classic jazz and how do they approach improvisation and how do you front a band, and the things I'm talking about. To come back to some of my musician friends and do another interview in those regards. Would that be something you'd be interested in? Absolutely.
I have a wonderful little video that we ended up finally sending out that I think we'll be sending out every year to our campers, and it's Jazz Band 101. And it's just the role of every instrument in the band and how they interact with each other. And it's pretty insightful.
And even if the kids decide they don't want to necessarily go into trad jazz, some of my high school students formed a very independent, successful ska band, but it's basically the same thing. You have 5 or 6 kids go out and they're trying to do something that'll piss off their parents and make some money, and isn't that what jazz always was?
Right, for sure.
Banu. Let me make sure I say this correctly. Let me channel Westy. Banu, thank you very much.
Oh, lovely.
For this interview, and I'm so glad we've had a chance to know each other. And thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you for reaching out to me. It's wonderful what you're doing. So good for you. And so nice to talk to you.
Oh, thank you. Now, I'm going to edit there, but I wanted to tell you that this upcoming Sunday, tomorrow, I'm actually doing a special episode where Bob Ringwald interviews me.
Oh, how cool.
So if you wanted, it was on the Dixieland Jazz mailing list, somebody suggested that somebody interview me, and he took up the gauntlet. So it turned out very interesting. So tomorrow at 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time.
Okay.
I'll have an interview with Bob Ringwald interviewing me, if you're curious.
Great. And so where do I just go to your channel, right?
Go to YouTube.
Yeah.
And it's Trad Jazz Today.
Right. Okay. Perfect.
That's it. And that's where people can find you, too. Now, when ours airs, I will make sure to send you a message the day beforehand, and I will actually send you your own copy via Messenger.
Okay.
The day it happens.
Great. I'll post something on Facebook, and I'll help promote it.
All right, Banu. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it. You have a good rest of the day. Okay. Bye.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan shows new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.